Steven Polacco. He needs no introduction, so we just want to find more things about his beautiful creation. So shall we start? Yes. Well, Steven, thank you so much for taking the time out to let us hear a lot of questions we have. So Steve, can you tell me, how are these pieces made? What's the process? They look very complicated.
This process is it is very complicated, and it started about maybe a year and 2 months ago. I've been after this this machine that was capable of laser etching and engraving and cutting, and all of those were in one vehicle. And so graciously, the university decided to buy one for division. I wrote up a nice little statement about how I think it would really benefit us, and it's benefiting me. So, but also us. But I had to learn it, right? So I had to learn it that summer. This was last summer, and learning those machines, although it's kind of it's supposed to be really, really user friendly, but when you're dealing with lasers, you have a lot of different variation in how the laser is actually, the intensity of it, the narrowness or wideness of the beam, the repetition pattern, the amount of passes it does, all these different things have to be dialed in. So I started kind of playing around with this and was just doing basic cutting patterns and things like that. And then I realized very quickly, when I fed material into it that was not wood or plastic, which were the two materials that were recommended, I fed watercolor paper in. And so in feeding watercolor paper, something really special happened where when set to engrave, it was taking off the first few microns of surface, but leaving the rest. So you had this natural toning coming from the burning, so it was yellows and oranges and things like that. But when I did a pass with this, again, just doing tests and then held it against the light, I was like, oh, well, that's really special. You know, that's something really, really special. And I've always been, I'm a big, I teach like soup to nuts as much as I can, the Gestalt psychology, the Gestalt approach to form and visual order. And those principles are not inventions as much as they are discoveries of how we piece together our worlds to create some sort of logic and hierarchy. Ultimately, things that are beautiful, things that have form, or things that are not. But the principle of closure, that the human eye is going to create form from proximity effect. So these little dots, how close they are, we create more of a really quick adjustments to determine what the form is. As they become further and further apart, we need more and more distance. These different things starting to play. And so I kind of proceeded from there and thinking that what would be a really good fit for this surface process was motion. And my MFA a million years ago at Berkeley was all motion based. I did a lot of closed circuit video on these kinds of ancient, big brick video monitors and giant cameras that I get from secondhand stores. And that introduced me to this concept of painting with light. I had a teacher at a really vulnerable time in my life. I had a teacher in my master's program at Berkeley who said, after looking at my paintings, he said, "Do you think that were Da Vinci alive today, he would be painting with paint or light?" And I said, well, that's a really compelling question. And I played with that notion of painting with light with my master's work, and then kind of returned back to traditional media, which is the more work on paper. And this show, I think, tends to marry those two. But the question was about process. I'm going to continue that. It's very, very easy for me to go off on a tangent with this work because the work is created by harnessing multiple tangents, like letting yourself meander and then bringing those things in. So there was the initial phases of doing this, and that was a lot of playing with different materials and seeing what materials would work. And whether or not translucency was an answer, if it had to be completely transparent in the points that the holes were. So then I went about the process of building a prototype, and that prototype was first off, you have to have your form or your idea, you know. And I started playing with grids. I thought grids would be the most basic building block. And of course, grids live heavily as structural elements in graphic design. They've been around forever. Not just graphic design, but this is a very quick way to determine proportion, is to have a grid and be able to put your objects and your shapes in the area. So I played with grids, and doing that, what that means to play with grids is there has to be a way to get shape to the laser. Right? You have to be able to tell the laser what to cut. So that's a process in my world of using Adobe Illustrator and at times just meticulously doing dots. And there are also ways to streamline that process, to kind of automate that process. For instance, a single stroke can have a line value, but it could also have a dotted value. Think of just kind of when you do underlines or dashes when you're doing your lines. So if it had dots, and that stroke were turned and curved and wrapped and layered, those dots would follow suit, something like that, for instance. So then, once you get those armatures and those armatures become dotted, you can actually go in and edit them. It's a whole lot easier to edit something that's been automated than it is to build it from scratch. Although I must say, that's not always true. There's some times when it's easier to just go at it from scratch. I found myself in about midpoint of this project just kind of really valuing the meditative process of just doing the dots by hand. It just became like much more valuable to me. I can't do some of the elaborate pattern work that I did by hand. I don't know if I'd have to be a 30-year master to be able to do those kinds of mandalas that are very spiritual and very beautiful, but instead, they do that. So then, process also got determined by form and form by process. There's a really nice reciprocal relationship between the two. So on the videos that are in that room, I had to determine what I wanted the video track to be. And so the ones in that room, at every point of a video, let's say you have a 1 second video, that video for 1 second is going to be 30 drawings or 30 frames. So if you have 5 minutes, it's going to be the multiples of those. You're going to end up with quite a few thousand frames when it's all said and done. So each one in that room, actually the work that's on the paper is a single frame. It's the point that at one point everything will align. And that became really kind of a North Star for a lot of this work, is to see that tension between when something on this very traditional watercolor medium or card or Illustrator board is frozen or stuck, where the inspiration or whatever those other things are kind of tumultuous and moving and churning behind it. So it's still a process answer, but it's a process through form and through discovery.
I think you have started a new art movement here, really.
No pun intended, right?
So with all these, do you consider yourself a designer or an artist?
Both. I really find the world of graphic design, visual design, design communication, visual communication, those things interface with the worlds of studio art practice, whatever you want to call it, at the basic, the foundation level, they're almost, they're the same. Our curriculum actually supports that the beginning work that any person who considers themselves a visual creative, they're going to be looking at those elements and principles essentially the same at the beginning. It becomes that wonderful fork in the road which used to be a whole lot clearer. You know, used to be you go to the design world, your job was to really illustrate a concept, and you weren't even in charge of the concept. The concept came to you from someone with an English degree or someone with a different part of the creative spectrum, and then your job was to try to add the visual language to that. And now it's a lot different. We still have people on copy and still have people on illustration in that world, but I don't think they need to be so separated. And I don't think I ever have thought that. Because I have a master's in art. And I teach graphic design, but I've also taught art. I teach graphic design artfully, and I teach art designfully, you know?
Exactly.
I really believe that you have to have all, and the good stuff that's out there, you can see it. You can see where the good work. I could strap a word on that and I could sell Coke or whatever the other thing is that I need to do. It's just the amount of work that goes into building the image. And the care that goes into harvesting that image, and then whether or not that image has a really deep language, you know, those are all really interesting questions for me.
On that note, you know, your artwork, I mean, the beauty of it, the aesthetics of it is immediate. But I wonder if you meant to have these pieces to be imbued with narrative as well.
Some.
What are these pieces about?
No, some absolutely. Like that piece, you know, you can't avoid the fact that it's a bomb that goes off every 3 minutes, you know, and people have to stand there and just kind of wait for it. And that's a really alarming thing to do, to wait for a bomb, you know. I don't know enough about that world, but I know metaphorically what it's like to wait for a disaster, to wait for, you know, heartache or whatever that might be. So this idea of form taking place over time is consistent. All of these, even the ones that look like they're repetitions, complete repetitions, like this one becomes clearer and less clear. It's not just the dots, and it has to do with the clarity opening up and closing, which is also, you know, definitely has a narrative. I don't think I know how to make purely visual. Here's the thing, when I started that inquiry over the summer, I was really political about it. I was doing a lot of work about Trump and about the president, all these different things, and they were super blatant. The first time I'd really been blatant, I'd had a blast being really blatant, and then I pulled back from that and said, that's just not what I want to make work about, right? Because I don't want it to feel like work. I want to make play. I want to do it. And I can't know that I really want to be blatant in my messaging, you know? So they become much more, I don't know, abstract. If I kind of search the Rolodex of terms from our histories, you know, they're abstracted, and they're just filled with metaphor, which a lot, you know, languages as well. So. But yeah, they're about stuff. There's one in there that's about my family. That was a really interesting. The family portrait one.
This one?
Yeah, and there's a great picture we took of Elizabeth and me and Enzo and Emilio lined up underneath it where we're supposed to be. So that was, I mean, to get to that, it's like building symbolic shapes that represent your. That was really fun. That was so fun to build those symbolic shapes and say, I'm more this than this. And then when you play with color and the video shapes, and you have like 50 different things you're playing with. And then time, there's a lot of things to play with. And the trick is, I think one of the reasons they all look pretty good is because you gotta keep it a bit abstract. If you get too literal, I think they start to become, people start looking for the capitalized meaning. They start looking beyond like the beauty, or whatever it might be, and they start looking for like a little bit. I've had people walk up to these that I just don't want to know what they're about. Truly don't want to have any idea. In fact, they want to resist it. I like that. I think we need a little bit of that right now.
So you have many ideas within these pictures. What are the next steps? Where you bring those?
Rest. This is a year and a half. I don't think I've done a year and a half deep dive for a while. But no, I really want the work to be seen. this is the first work I've done in a while that I've really wanted to advocate for and push out there, and just really kind of spend the summer getting those people, you know, that have the keys to the other eyeballs, and just create some partnerships around it. I think that there is something special. There's so many other new potential avenues for this to take, looking at scale, looking at like there's all this wonderful commercial potential, to be fair, that would be like, could this work hang on the surface of your television at home? And yes, it could. And you could have the USB stick, and you put the USB in, you'd hang the paper on the TV. And there would be your art when you don't want to have television. Because there's that whole thing there too, that this is video, this is TV. This is a matter of taking back. That's the whole concept of having one frame that is personal, that is yours, that is the moment, versus the thousands and thousands. So I am in this case trying to hide that they are televisions, yes. Like the Berkeley grad in me is like, don't do that, right? Make sure you tell everyone they're TVs, so that you can really see the dichotomy of like 400-year-old to 600-year-old paper, 300 versus video, what that means. So those things are kind of percolating, you know. This idea of doing an entire show that is on cell phone screens and seeing what the imagery might be. I don't want them to feel like screensavers. They're kind of taking back screensavers. But yeah.
So on that note, then it seems like it's a very democratic way of you to disperse your art. So what is original? Are they like a prints? Do you have editions?
So that's a really, I think that's kind of the question of the day for me, is to determine the next steps. Because thankfully I've had people who want to buy them, a few of them, and we have to come to that conclusion or come to an agreement. And I do see them as limited editions. Because I have all the digital media, and digital is one of those things that allows you to create as many reproductions as you want, just like photography before it. So I can reproduce these, and I think it would be a contract with a buyer to say, I'm going to only reproduce 5, or I'm going to only reproduce 10, or whatever that is. Much like you do when you're doing print of an original. But I consider these, right now, they are most certainly original pieces. They don't have any, there's no downstream from them. They're just them. So what could be, you know, that's a very different story. But I'm open to determining what they are from relationships with the buyers.
So yeah, the buyers and public. Actually, one viewer at your opening said, "Wow, this thing should go to a big hotel,
right.
in the lobby, so more people can
I
see."
agree.
Yeah. So, what is your strategy to get more people to see your beautiful art?
I mean, this is the first time I've actually found that social media is a bit relevant in my life. It's always just kind of been a place to post pictures of my kids, which is important, but maybe not what it could be. So I've been doing a lot of social media, I've been bothering people with social media. And I think that might be something I continue to do, but they're not social media, I mean, it's not friendly for that medium. It's not something to experience that way.
Exactly.
So it requires venue, and that means really like asking my colleagues and talking with people in the Bay Area and finding, because I do have a lot of those friends that went to start galleries, and a few of them are still doing it after 25 years. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I don't know if a gallery is, I don't know yet. I think there's lots of different venues that could be something I haven't really conceived.
Yeah, it's.
And I also really like the idea of these mosaicing together to create scale. Because there are some limitations in the medium. The laser itself has a gate that's 20 inches wide. I picked a monitor that was 20 inches by 30 inches essentially. So when you put the paper in and you do your cutting or the board or whatever it is you're doing, unless you fold it, which I did here, right? So that's a mirror image top and bottom, so that's folded and the laser goes through and creates the top and bottom simultaneously, then you unfold it and put it up. But you can't get, unless you stitch together your paper, or you do, and then so I've got this notebook that's filled with all these potential ways to put together quilts of sorts of these things onto these large 70-inch monitors. Because I don't want the scale to be impaired or prohibited. I want it to be, I want it to be able to kind of be as big as it wants to be. I was hearing this morning that the Giants have a new screen that is 10,000 square feet big.
Oh, a Jumbotron?
At 4K. 4K. 4K means 4,000 by 2,500 pixels essentially. So when you think of 10,000 square feet at that resolution, it's mind.
Won't help them win the game.
Yeah, right?
Could they take a film of this and put it on the Jumbotron?
Well, no. I mean that gets into a deeper question of what is image,
I could
right?
see this as a stage production, as
Sure.
a background for stage.
Sure. Yeah.
And so it would have to be.
Right now I'm so in love with the materiality of them that the video for me is you would be shocked if I took the paper off. Let me just put it that way. You'd be shocked. To get them to look like this, it's a completely different thing. So yes, you could take a video of the combination of the two, which is exactly what social media is. I think my sister's doing that right now. It is a nice way to share, but it's kind of, that's what I mean by like, it really, for me, attacks in a really good way this concept of what is image, what is art, what is design, because it has to be experienced, tactily. And I think it's a good example of why we go to museums, why we go to galleries. Instead of watching the Yule-log on the TV, it's like, you really want to have a different experience. I don't know if that's, museum attendance is up. People are realizing more and more they really have to get themselves to see those things in person, smell the paint.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I really think you have started a new art movement here. And if Leonardo da Vinci were alive today, I think that probably he would have moved towards those directions.
He would have done it first. So.
Oh, okay. He would have brought you.
Thanks, Leo. Kind of like The Simpsons, you know how they always do everything first, everyone just copies them.
With the color, the form, and that's 21st century direction.
Okay,
Thank you, Steven,
Thank
for
you
sharing
very
this.
much.
Do we have any questions?
I'm understanding the laser cutting, but I can't conceive quite how you're getting the colors.
The colors underneath each piece of paper is a 20 by 30 inch television set.
Okay.
It's a flat screen TV. So if you were to take cocktail napkins and burn a bunch of holes in it and then stick that on your TV at home, you would get that.
Got it. Okay.
I've used that exact same example with a lot of different people, and they get it. They're like, oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, I can agree.
But just in that process, as much as I enjoy that you know that now, I really enjoyed it more when you didn't know. And that's just, that's just kind of the way the world works. You can't always just keep the curtain half open. You kind of gotta, especially today, you gotta,
The Wizard of Oz.
So, Steven, I have two things. Well, first, I mean, just on the practical note of expanding your work, I think there's all kinds of, opportunities in public arts commissions.
There you go.
So, getting on the pre-approved artist, radar for all the public arts commissions in the area, I think they would be really excited to find opportunities for the work in different contexts. But on a more academic question, I'm curious, your family's here, who's your artist family that is inspiring this work? Artist and designer family.
Yeah, I pulled them together. We're so fortunate being teachers because we have to source that new work for our students at all times. And what I do more than anything is I will source design work from books and catalogs and various places online, and then just screenshot all of those and put them in whatever slide presentations. But what that has meant, and I don't know how intentional this is, and I don't know if I'm gonna sound like saying it, but I've really not wanted to follow contemporary art practice for about a year. And I've done that before in my life. I've had these moments where I've just really just soaked it all up. And I guess that informs me when I'm not soaking it all up, right? But I've kind of dug a little bit into, and I think that if a student said that to me, I'd be like, no, that's not what we're supposed to do. You know, you're really supposed to just kind of always, but I do believe there should be also some room to let the things that you've absorbed and viewed kind of wash over you and be able to settle. And I've had the most like gracious situation, like at this university, to be able to have a job and be able to build this at a pace that I determine, right? And that means that sometimes I'm looking, and sometimes, well, I'm always looking, right? That's what my artist statement's about. But I want now, after this little show and this little part of the world is done, I want to see what other people are doing in this area. But I also lately, I gotta be honest though, like a lot of the folks that I went to school with, a lot of the painters, a lot of the people I've learned from them, you know, these people are kind of coming back into my lexicon in ways that I didn't know they'd come back. So I started opening up all those old books on video art. I started looking at what these people had, but only after it was done.
Right,
You
but
know?
maybe what you're saying is, well, sometimes, like, some people have opened the doors or kind of given you insight or inspiration, even how to install video art, or, you know, or maybe it's just the idea of looking at this and thinking, well, gosh, this relates to what Pollock did. Or,
Right. It's also really loving the puzzles that are put at your feet when you're a designer, and then you have to solve the puzzle in order, because every one of them, I'm not kidding, like there's so many process pieces that I just had to figure out. And we live in a world where like YouTube is just there. It's just this, it's kind of like there's this argument about education versus YouTube. And I think that if you are educated, YouTube is this incredible utility to learn step skills. That's what I call them, like step skills, like the how-tos of the world, right? But then it's like, that's kind of what this work is also about. It's like these little how-to steps to get to something that becomes a much larger intellectual and emotional piece, you know?
without that,
Yeah, if it's just, Lord knows, this doesn't just represent, you know, like step work. But I gotta be honest, like there's this Glowforge users forum, and Glowforge is the machine we have. And I have not posted any of this work to the Glowforge users forum yet because I'm like nervous to. Not because I don't want someone to take it. You know, it's just honestly kind of like this feeling of wanting to make my mark. And I think that so much in art, you know, this being an individual and doing an individual thing in a digital world, it's just, I think a lot of us feel like that's like being taken away. Like there's no identity, it's just a series of kind of post-Warholian.
Let them find you, let them discover you.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And then that is in conflict with this natural desire to want to crow. Like,
And
I'm really
share.
proud of doing this work, and this, you know.
Share,
Exactly.
and that's what this forum is. Yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah, I can't wait to just spend a summer, like, just opening up some of my, you know, avenues that I've kind of intentionally closed off,
Oh,
you
sure,
know,
that's-
and going into absorb mode, and so I don't have to be in make mode right now. It's good. And then those pieces, by the way, they're not just afterthoughts. Those represent what it looks like to have. No, the pieces on the wall.
Yeah.
The non-video pieces. Those represent. You know, the marks that are made here, and each one of them hangs over another set of marks. Like the circular pieces are over grid work or even solid color, what have you. And I just really do like, I always have them. I worked for 35 years. It's been about 1, 2, and just seeing through one. I've found that. Like I found that that's what my work has been about. I don't know if that's what it's been about, but that's what it's been made of. About is a completely different argument, but it's been made of just kind of these dichotomies.
Your work is now a living thing. That's alive. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
the movements.
It's alive, it's a living thing, it's a creature.
And I would argue that Cezanne is alive, and as is Matisse, and, you know. And I agree that they have more motion, pixels and such. I don't know. I think that this is the kind of thing I really enjoy. I think we should just all sit in here with coffee until 2 in the morning and just kick it around, because what else is there?
So I just finished watching a documentary on Gerhard Richter.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
there's a favorite.
and I can kind of see you, I'm maybe overinterpreting, but I didn't really know his technique until I watched the documentary, but he put the splashes of solid color up there, and I said, oh, you know, that's interesting, abstract. I had no idea where he was going to take it, but I was impressed with he stepped back, and he kept changing it. You probably have that same capability here, don't you? Looking at it and then thinking,
Oh my gosh, each one of these is just the tip of an iceberg. Sometimes you got lucky, but most of them are really a dance, yeah. I have a big pile of scraps, a really, really big pile of scraps. I wanted to do on that long wall, I was going to do a piece where I took every single reject and I was going to put them all up, and they were going to all sit on top of some quote about success and failure. And you're going to have to look through the rejects to get to the success and failure statement. Because, I mean, I don't want to do that, but it could be neat. You know, I don't want our students thinking that we just do good work all the time. That's not what any of what we do. That's why pencils have lasers.
So, you know, it's difficult. Is your work 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional? It's 5th dimension. You include the 5th dimension here, the movement. Yeah, that's what you are getting at. Yeah. Very good.
You actually, with your necklace and your color, are part of that painting. If your necklace were moving.
Nice. Environmental art then, huh? Yeah. So there's a 6th dimension.
Sandy specific.
Absolutely
I
amazing.
have to take off, but I just
Thank you so much for coming. It means a lot.
I was so sad I couldn't be at the opening, but this is actually more fun in a way to hear more of the backstory. But I just said to Lynn, so I'm not the only one that thinks that's like a living Pollock.
Yeah.
And actually, it's more interesting because I never found, personally, in terms of interacting with it, like you said, the thesis movement and how like it wasn't until I knew the backstory that Pollock was interested.
Yeah.
This is interesting.
Oh, that's
without the backstory.
Right.
The backstory adds richness.
It's a whole interesting concept there, isn't
Yeah.
it? Interesting
Yeah.
without
I
needing the backstory.
Yeah, for Pollock, you need a picture of him actually doing
It's
this.
true.
Yeah.
No, so much of this is like
You have to say
we don't need.
Yeah.
You don't need the biography. That's I think that's a lot of people that don't understand about pop art is that it can be interesting without needing the depth piece
Exactly.
and still be really interesting. I don't know.
The beauty.
I don't call this pop though. I don't call it.
No, it's not.
Well, I actually think of also of
Thank you.
of artists like Sam Taylor Wood, who does those portraits. Video portraits, where people actually, they're actors that hold a position.
That guy, yeah.
And you just stand there, like this piece totally reminds me of that, like catches your eye, there is movement, it's static, but you just sense that something is gonna...
Speed is really an important piece. Some of these are, in my opinion, after looking at it for a while, they're running way too fast. I tried a lot of things on some of them. I tried actually videoing them in with a slow motion camera because there's no way on some of them to time it back. Particle generators have a very hard time doing what they do slowly. And I can do it, I'm not nervous about it. I did it in a few of them.
Yeah.
But when it's just something as simple as scale and opacity, that's something you can time out over a year. The changes are going to be so incremental, so slow.
Wow.
So those are things that are fun.
So there's, I think, a really radical piece to this that I really enjoy, and that is that it also slows you down. As you know, we live in this really, we're speeding up constantly, but that when I'm in here viewing, I have to stop and I have to wait and I have to kind of slip into a space that's not my everyday space as I'm being with what's happening, and I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Mari. That means a lot.
Mari.
Yeah, that's a very accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
piggyback on what she said at the opening reception, one individual said, won't it be nice if you can have a place in front of this I can meditate?
Those big round chairs are parked in those rooms, in my opinion, for that reason. They asked me what I wanted to put in these spaces.
Yeah, actually the TV, patenting the TV cover could hook up with Deepak Chopra.
And that's exactly what it is. I mean, it's not saying that television doesn't have a place. It has a time.
Exactly. And when it's not
That's it.
on, what else could it be
Right.
than this black?
And all the market, and has been for the last 8 years, is about making that TV physically disappear. So there's a big new LG one that's $20,000, and the TV rolls because they have this bendable substrate that can actually roll now for OLED, and they have them rolling out and they have them rolling back down because so many people put their design aesthetic and the television at odds. Well, think of it as, in my opinion, as being a really viable and beautiful potential surface. And the great thing is, like in that room there, no one actually called me on it, but sorry. In that room in there was a video that was running on one of them, night one, the opening night, that I didn't like. So I just swapped out the video and no one said anything. But it's a completely different piece now. So there's a lot, I think, of room to play with kind of the, those little paper dresses. Use them,
Right, yeah. What mood are you in? Essential oils. Essential
Same
oils
deal.
go with this.
Done. And just giving, something also very interesting happens when you hang one of them and like watch a baseball game through it. Like it really becomes a different.
I think you better hurry on that, Steven.
I don't know how to patent.
Yeah, you better patent on this.
Maybe you better, because somebody's going to invent something like this, and they'll make millions.
Yeah. You really have
Doesn't George
started
Foreman run some kind of patent advising? Seen it on it.
God, I hope so, because I want to see that. George Foreman's patent advice.
It's on your YouTube.
I've never seen on a cruise.
Yeah, I think there's some real room for.
Or talk to West Elm or Crate and Barrel. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about social media is, intellectual property-wise, this is all being documented.
Yeah.
Right? So it's all there, and if I ever wanted to or needed to revert back to that. I will say this though, one of the intentions of this show when working with students, Sandy's class, and just I want students to look at this and be able to duplicate it. Not that they necessarily will, but they have to know that these materials are here and available so that they can play with these machines to do this stuff. And I think that after I've made my millions off of it, I will absolutely welcome student work, but until then, don't you even think about it, YouTube.
Well, it is also interesting because we have so many students that love the physical, tangible materials and love the light and the vividness of the computer screen. And, so just.
I mean, Lynn, you've known me for 13 years. Could this show be any more direct to what we've talked about for 13 years? Like,
Yeah.
those two different things.
No, I mean, I was just thinking a while ago, this is why we hired Steven.
We have four very nice students here. I wonder what they think. What do you think, guys? Yes.
I was going to say also, going off what she said, that it does kind of appeal to those who are very indulged in computer screens and those who just like the simplicity of just looking at paper or, design on paper. So when you look at it, you can, and also like I like what you said about how not, there's no specific meaning behind it and how the person's allowed to form their own meaning if they want to, because it really opens up the doors for, imagination and I really like it. So
I think, especially like the younger you are, the more like information you need a day, where it's just kind of like back to back, kind of like more and more. And this, I don't feel like I have to, like I look at it, understand it really quickly, and then move on. It's like I can look at it and just be present with it and just kind of enjoy it and kind of get lost in the design and how it changes.
That's such high praise. I mean,
really
it's
fun.
fantastic.
And make your own legend. One day you may be feeling a certain way and see it entirely differently.
Oh,
the
they
next
should
day.
definitely be mirrors.
Your mood changes and it's a different piece because it's Here, that's amazing. I'm very proud of you.
That's my mom.
I agree with you.